immune system. And Friday will be diet and the mind. And then on Saturday evening, we'll be doing temperance. And on Sunday, we're going to do a cooking demonstration, but we don't have all the details on that yet. So that you'll get that before we get to Friday. So without any further delay, I want to bring up Dwayne Lemon, and you guys are just going to be amazed.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, let me go ahead and say good evening to everyone. So glad to be here with you all. And I'm very excited to talk about something that really needs to be talked about. Tonight, we're going to be talking about hypertension. And hypertension, it has a nickname. And the nickname of hypertension is not a good one. And that nickname is the silent killer. Okay, the silent killer. Can anybody tell me why is hypertension called the silent killer?
There's no symptoms a lot of times.
Sometimes the first symptom is your last symptom, which could be a heart attack or a stroke or things of that nature. It's kind of amazing how you can feel great and be right moments away from a terrible crisis. And that's not to instill any type of anxiety in any of our hearts. That's why we're here tonight. Tonight we're trying to do what we can to mitigate any anxieties. But the reality is that there are some things we need to consider when we're dealing with the subject of hypertension, this very, very silent killer. And it's something we all should pay attention to, okay? And this includes myself as well as all of us, especially those of us who are a little bit there up in age. There are some factors of the realities of life that as we get a little older, some things become more susceptible. Arterial stiffness and things of this nature becomes much, much more of a reality to us. But the good news is there's a lot that can be done. And one of the things I love the most is the reality, it's such good news. In our medical world today, if you study within a certain box, then you don't look outside of the box, right? Some of you are familiar with the phrase, think outside the box, or whatever. A lot of times people, when they look inside the box and you ask the question, can hypertension be reversed? If you were to do a Google search, just a natural Google search, can hypertension be reversed? Do you know that the majority of the answers you're going to see is no? They're going to let you know that hypertension is a disease people have to deal with for the rest of their lives. But there are tens of thousands of individuals, yea, hundreds of thousands, who have had stage or grade 3, grade 4 hypertension, and today they do not have it. It was reversed. And so the reality is that I cannot thank God enough that there are people who are looking outside the box. And they're looking at other ways that we can address some of these WDLDs. We're going to be talking about that throughout the week. Those 4 letters, WDLD. If you're taking notes, you want to write that down, WDLD. When you think about type 2 diabetes, when you think about hypertension, when you think about many cancers, when you think about mental health disorders, and even some neurodegenerative diseases, they are all under the category of WDLD. What does that stand for? Western debilitating lifestyle diseases. That's literally what WDLD stands for. Western debilitating lifestyle diseases. And that is the reality, is that the great number of diseases we battle with in our world today are directly connected with our lifestyle. And as a result of that, if a bad lifestyle brought it on, then by God's grace, a good lifestyle can help get rid of it. And so there are things out there. How many of you, let's see how many deep medical students we have here. How many of you are familiar with a term called epigenetics? Anybody familiar with that? Okay, epigenetics. Really, really awesome study. We all have what's called gene expression, okay? We have certain genes in our bodies. They express themselves certain ways. Well, what they have discovered in the study of epigenetics is that if a person changes their lifestyle, there's a way that you can cut off bad gene expression and cut on good gene expression. And all of that is summarized under this term, epigenetics. I just gave you the very simple breakdown of it. Of course, there's a much, much deeper scientific breakdown. But the reality is that You have no idea, family, how much you are truly the architects of your future. And I am too. We can't control everything. I wish we could. I'm sure we all want to. But if we can control everything, we would no longer be called humans. We'd be called God. But the reality is we're not God. The reality is that we can't control everything. But there's a lot that we can control, and that is our responsibility. So I can't wait to talk about this subject so we can really dive into the reality of what is hypertension, what causes it, what are ways to prevent it, and then if I have it, what are some ways to overcome it? And I got a lot to share. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. And, these are health meetings, okay? These are health meetings. But last night we talked a little bit about, God's great desire, and you heard me just reference God's grace. And, I am a Christian, so I just always like to pray and just ask for God's blessings on all of us. So I hope you don't mind if I just have a short little prayer to ask for God's blessings on all of us, and then we're going to go ahead and dive right in. Father in heaven, we want to thank you so much for the privilege to look to this very important subject of how to silence the silent killer. Bless us, Lord. I pray that as we look at these things, we'll come to great understanding. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, when we're dealing with hypertension, the first thing we need to do is kind of break it down. Like what is it? Let's understand a little bit about blood pressure. Now, I'm going to ask a question. How much blood do you think your heart pumps throughout the body in a given day? How many, let's say gallons. How many gallons would you say? Quite a bit. That's fair. That's fine. Quite a bit. No problem. You said 98? Wow, that's a lot. 98 gallons. Okay, 100 gallons. Okay, good. What else would you say? We got 98. We got a lot. We got 98 and we got 100. Any other guess on how much gallons of blood does our heart pump throughout the body in a given day? We heard a lot, 98, and 100. Any others? Say again? 20 gallons. Okay, give me two more. Now, this is a very active side over here. What's going on over here? Okay. You say again?
149.
149. Woo! Okay. 50. Give me one more. 64. 164. So the top number is 164 gallons. Way off, right? What would you say? Way off less or way off more?
Way off low.
Way off low. Are you ready for this?
A whole lot.
Your heart pumps approximately 1,900 gallons of blood throughout the blood vessels in your body every day. I mean, is that amazing? I'm telling you, 1,900 gallons. That is a ton of blood. Look at this. Your heart pumps approximately 1,900 gallons of blood through the blood vessels in your body every day. Now, blood pressure is the force applied against the walls of the arteries as the heart pumps blood through the body. The pressure is determined by the force and amount of blood pumped and the size and flexibility of the arteries, okay? So we are really a blood factory, believe that. And the life of the flesh is in the blood. So, we got blood flowing all through us, right? Now, this is just to get a general idea of blood pressure. But now when we talk about more to our topic tonight, what is high blood pressure? What is high blood pressure? Well, I want you to think about it this way. Boa constrictors. How many of you like boa constrictors? I'm sure none of the ladies are going to raise their hands. When you think about a boa constrictor, does it kill its prey by venom? No. How does it kill its prey? Squeezing. That's why it's called boa constrictor, okay? It squeezes, right? Now, there's several of us here that wear glasses, and I realize, I'm like, you look a little different. That's because I'm not wearing my glasses like I was last night. But fortunately, I'll be okay. But when you think about dilation, when we get our glasses, we have to have our eyes dilated, right? And when we have our eyes dilated, are the pupils in our eyes getting smaller or are they getting wider and bigger? They're getting wider and bigger. When you think of high blood pressure, another term that is often used is called vasoconstriction. Okay, those vessels that we have that blood is supposed to easily flow through, what happens in high blood pressure is something is causing a constriction of those vessels where they're not as wide open as they should be. So something is now constricting or squeezing them. So what does the heart have to do? The heart has to pump harder to get that blood through, hence high blood pressure. You get that? So what we really want to do when we're trying to fight high blood pressure is we want to go from vasoconstriction to vasodilation. We want to get those blood vessels opening nice and wide so the blood can just flow through and all is well. So when we think about high blood pressure, remember, it's difficult for blood to flow through your blood vessels. The pressure against the walls of your vessels will increase. This can cause high blood pressure, also known as hypertension. So that's like the super hyper layman's term of it. When you think about high blood pressure, vasoconstriction, those vessels are being squeezed, they're being constricted. Blood is not able to flow through like it should, and this is the problem. And hence the body needs to do something about it. Yea, we need to do something about it. So let's continue. When we start talking about who has it, it's an alarming number. One of the reasons, now what I'm about to put up here are the facts of those who have been studied on. Meaning there's a lot of people, and you're going to see this especially tomorrow night, it is an alarming number of how many people are walking around with diabetes and don't even know it. It's undiagnosed. But you'll also see that it's true with hypertension. Because if I ask a lot of you, how many of you make it your routine to check your blood pressure daily or once a week or whatever, there's probably going to be some of us that's like, I can't tell you the last time I even did that stuff. Because what do? We say, I feel great, therefore I am great. But is that true? No, that's why, again, it's called the silent killer, because it doesn't necessarily give off symptoms. Now, if your blood pressure is very high, it can give off some symptoms. I had a friend one time, her blood pressure was approximately 300 over 150. She was in crisis mode. So she was stage 4. She was a corner away from probably having a heart attack or something else. But you know what she had? A bad headache. She just had a bad headache. It was terrible. She said, I got to get something going on. And she went to the clinic, and they took her blood pressure, and they told her, you stay right here. We have an ambulance picking you up. And then the rest was history. She is well today. Okay, her blood pressure is doing much, much, much better, and she's fine. But in her case, the silent killer did not succeed. Thank God. She had a symptom. But it's not always the case for everybody else, okay? So the reality is that 119.9 million people in America have hypertension, okay? 119.9, almost rounded off to 120. Now, here's what we're looking at. I want you to look at these numbers here. Let me see if I can, yeah, there you go. Let me magnify that a little bit. Yeah, so here's what they found. If defined as systolic, whenever you think of systolic, think top number. Whenever you think of diastolic, think bottom number, okay? So if somebody says systolic, systolic top number, diastolic bottom number. Now, here's what they said. Defined as a systolic blood pressure greater than 130, or a diastolic pressure greater than 80. So if you're anywhere 131 or higher on your systolic, or you're 81 or higher on your diastolic, there's going to be some level of the mentioning of the word hypertension. Now, typically if you're in your 130s and your 80s, you're going to be classified as pre-hypertensive, okay? Pre-hypertensive. If you are 140 and above or 91 and above, that's when it's considered hypertension, okay? So if you're anywhere between, again, the 130s or the 80s, not good, but not necessarily a death sentence either. It's just that you're in the pre-hypertensive stage. 140 and 90s, you're grade 1 or stage 1 hypertensive. And then it goes into stage 2 and 3 and then obviously stage 4, all right? These come, these are some facts, right there from the CDC and otherwise. Very easy things to research if you just care to look. Now, the reality is in case you haven't noticed, I'm black. I don't know if you noticed that or not. Now, in case you haven't noticed, I'm just making you aware. Now, the reason why I'm making this point is because something very specific to the community that I'm a part of is also directly connected to hypertension. The reality is that African Americans have it over a third more often than Caucasians. And those 18 to 44 years of age have it more frequently than Caucasians. So you will find that there are certain diseases that affect certain demographics more than others. So if I ever go into a black community, I'm definitely going to talk about hypertension, because I know that that's going to be an issue. If I went into an Indian community, I probably would talk about digestive issues, because of the high level culturally of eating lots and lots of spicy foods. A lot of those spicy foods can be absolute triggers for gastritis and a lot of other problems. It can aggravate pancreatitis, and the list goes on. So sometimes knowing the demographics that you're talking to becomes very important. So hypertension affects everybody, but it especially hits the African American community in a very big way. Not only that, ladies, women are about as likely as men to develop high blood pressure during their lifetimes. However, watch this. For people younger than 45 years old, the condition affects more men than women, 45 and under. It affects more men than women. But, watch this. For people 65 years old or older, high blood pressure affects more women than men. That was a very interesting finding. It affects more women than men. Women have hypertension less often than men until menopause is over. And then it starts to kick in pretty strong. Then soon after, they have it as often as men. Okay? So this is something we're not just paying attention to everybody, but we're also looking, especially in the black community, but we're also looking at women, especially women that are older in age, especially if you get around your 60s. But guess what? It's even deeper than that. And, this statistic was amazing to me because, I got to admit, in my childhood, I never thought youth and hypertension were two words that would go together. But nowadays, when you start looking at certain studies out there, here's what they're finding. High blood pressure in kids and teens. Take a look at this. February 14, just this year, it says too many kids and teens have high blood pressure. Did you know that? Kids and teens, they have high blood pressure. It says, and other risk factors for heart disease and stroke. Can you imagine young people today? But one of the reasons for this is because there is such a sedentary lifestyle that young people are living today. When I was 12 years old, man, I was outside. I was outside playing stickball. I was outside playing freeze tag. We were outside doing all sorts of things that was keeping our metabolism just going, and the list goes on. But now, as a result of social media and a lot of these amazing and captivating electronics with all of the retina screen display and just the beauty of holding one of these things in your hand, we're finding that young people are not as interested. I've actually walked in group meetings with young people, and there was a bunch of them, and they were all sitting in the room, and instead of their heads looking up at each other, all of their heads were looking down at their phones. And I'm thinking to myself, aren't you guys hanging out right now? Like, you're supposed to be talking to each other. And they'll actually be in the same room together and send a text to each other versus saying, hey, And I'm just like, oh man, this is a new culture. Really, really new culture. But the reality is that the sedentary lifestyle is hurting us. There's an old saying, not really an old saying, but there's a saying that says, sitting is the new cigarette. Sitting is the new cigarette because we just sit too long. And your body was made to move, okay? So here's what they found. CDC study shows that about 1 in 25 youth ages 12 to 19 have hypertension. And 1 in 10 has elevated blood pressure, previously called prehypertension. What was the correlating factor here? High blood pressure is more common in youth with obesity. So again, if we're seeing more of our young people, especially if they're gaining weight and these type of things, there's a chance. Because remember, how many of us would normally, a lot of us, we're not even checking our own blood pressure. But how many of us would be inclined to check our youth's blood pressure, right? It's a natural assumption that these guys are fine, or whatever. Not realizing, actually, we need to pay attention to this. And how much the more if we're noticing that our young people are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and gaining more weight. This is one of the indicators, okay? So unfortunately, when we talk about 120, and again, look at those numbers there. It says 1 in 25 youth ages 12 to 19 have hypertension. You do understand that means above 140 and above 90. How do we know that? Because of the next sentence. Look at the next sentence. It says, and 1 in 10 has elevated blood pressure. Elevated blood pressure is above 130 and above the 80. So literally, there's a lot of young people, 1 in 10, that have pre-hypertension, but then there's 1 in 25 that actually have grade 1 or higher. I don't know if you've noticed, but, and this is very sad, believe me when I say I wish I never had to make this point. But you got young people today that are claiming their own lives. They're killing themselves. And that's a tragedy of tragedies. And these are teenagers, okay? I have statistics that show, when we talk about diet in the mind on Friday night, I'm actually going to put up the statistics of how many young people are literally killing themselves because mental health disorder is at an all-time high, okay? So we're going to talk about that on Friday night and how can we help our young people as well as our adults to overcome some of these battles of the mind. That's the whole purpose of Friday night. I cannot wait to go into that. But the reality is that way before they dare do something so extreme like take their own lives, the reality is what are they dealing with? Stress. They're dealing with high-level stress. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't that strange? Young, stressed-out people. We used to always think that was for the people who had jobs and businesses and children and spouses and all the challenges of life. We would say, yeah, for the older ages. But now we have a lot of young people that are terribly stressed out over whatever their realities are. And along with that stress can come vasoconstriction. So we have a very serious crisis when we're talking about hypertension. We have a very serious issue, but the good news is we have a very serious solution to these issues. Now, you remember last night we talked about some of the Egyptian diseases, right? I thought that this was a very important point because, we talked about how when it comes to God, and I realize that there's a diversity in our communities. There's some people who are not religious, so that's fine, no judgment. But then there are some people who are religious. But when they are religious, they don't necessarily connect God caring about their bodies. They usually think God just cares about their spiritual eternal life and things of that nature. Well, yesterday we saw how, if you believe in God, God made a promise. He said, hey, if you hearken to what I say and do everything I say, he says, I won't let these diseases that fell on the Egyptians fall on you. And these are some of the diseases that fell on the Egyptians, things like arthritis, things like chickenpox, hives, cancer, and just terrible diseases. But here's something I thought was amazing. Did you know that one of the other diseases that fell on Egyptians that's proven scientifically was heart disease? Ancient mummies prove heart disease is as old as we are. Again, blood vessels are very well preserved in mummies. So when they exhume these mummies from various places all over the world, they're able to extract those blood vessels to see what was going on in their systems. So here's what they found. A paper published early today in Global Heart reported that atherosclerosis is surprisingly easy to find in the remains of ancient humans from Egypt, Peru, the Aleutian Islands, North America, East Asia, and Europe. Researchers reviewed computed tomographic scans of the mummies to detect calcification in the arteries. Calcification in the arteries, imagine that. They said, the fact that it's so easy to find these calcifications, these residues and sediments in ancient people is surprising, said study co-author Dr. Randall Thompson, an associate professor of medicine at the University of Missouri School of Medicine in Kansas City. It was surprising to us and to a lot of people. Did you know that mummies actually, or again, if we were to talk about the Egyptians, they actually suffered with heart disease as well? And so the reality is that none of this stuff we're going through is new. It's like there were societies that went through this before. So let's not be too quick to say, boy, this is a new phenomenon that's affecting Western society. No, it's not. It's like these things have been around for ages, for centuries, if not millennia. And so the reality is that what do? The first step, now this is so big. I really hope that, I don't know how much you will leave with from our meetings night after night, but I hope you leave with this point. Whenever you're dealing with a disease, regardless of what the disease is, do not forget this principle. Ascertain the cause. Find out what's causing the problem. Don't get wrapped up too much in just treating the symptom, okay? If you have a nosebleed, you need to address the nosebleed. But remember, that's just a symptom. The nosebleed is a symptom of a greater problem. You need to dig in and find out what caused my nose to bleed. It's the same thing with hypertension. It's going to be the same thing with diabetes. It's going to be the same thing with cancer. You always want to find out what's the cause, what's causing this, because I'm going to let you in on a secret. Are you ready for a secret? Any of you like secrets? Are you ready for this secret? 9 times out of 10, your cure is in your cause. I'm going to repeat that. 9 times out of 10, your cure is in your cause. Once you find out what's causing your problem, you now know how to cure your problem because you've identified what caused it. But if you don't know what's causing it, that's when we're running all over the place trying to solve a problem and we're beating in the air and we don't have any idea what we're doing. And so always remember that. I don't care what your problem is. You can even make this problem, you can bring this problem into your marriage. You can bring it into a lot of scenarios. If a husband and wife are having disagreements all the time, don't focus on the symptom. The symptom is my wife walked in the house and she didn't say hi to me. That's a symptom. You need to find out what caused her to walk into the house and not say hi to me when that's her normal routine to come and say hi to me. Ascertain the cause. Don't just address the symptom. You can apply this principle in so many areas of your life, but so it is with hypertension. You want to find out what causes it, okay? Now, there is actually a statement, and it's interesting because I remember that I was in an elevator. We had probably about, maybe 4 or 5 medical practitioners in the elevator, and we were all going up in the hospital, and, I just said to them, I said, well, a friend of mine and I were talking, and I said, well, we need to just, we need to start learning how to ascertain the cause to the problem rather than just doing symptomatic treatment. And that's all I said. I said, we need to learn how to ascertain the cause to a problem rather than just doing symptomatic treatment. And immediately, everybody, my friend told me, he said, everybody behind me was like, hey, that was pretty good, whatever. Like, they really like that, right? And it's amazing how our minds have been so deeply trained to just treat the symptom to the problem, but not to treat the cause. And when you address the cause, that's how you make a lot of bad stuff go away. But you can literally treat symptoms, hear me good, you could treat symptoms for years and never address the problem. And again, I know how to do micro thinking, but I like doing macro thinking as well. In my macro thinking, I'm like, this is a solution to a lot of problems in life. Address the cause. Stop fighting over symptoms. You got a problem in your church, address the cause. Don't just fight the symptoms. You have a problem in your marriage, address the cause. Don't just fight the symptoms. If you have a problem in your body, a disease, address the cause. Don't just fight the symptoms. Now, somebody may say, Dwayne, where'd you get that from? And I'll say, well, only because you asked. Only because you asked. You know where I got it from? Do you remember how we were looking at this right here? And we were watching all these diseases. Those are clearly diseases, right? But the Bible actually uses a language, and this is why I like this from an educational standpoint. A lot of people don't know that the Bible has a lot of health information in it. Okay? Like the same way that in our medical system today, if you want to know what disease someone has, you draw blood. The reason why is because the Bible actually says the life of the flesh is in the blood. So life is in the blood, and guess what? Disease is in the blood. So these are like biblical principles, but they're now being found and verified through science. Well, so it is here. These things were called curses. Consumption was a curse, fever was a curse, inflammation was a curse, botch was a curse. But we're seeing that the word curse and disease is almost synonymous here. Well, the reason why this becomes important is because there's something I've learned. When you're addressing the cause, here's something I actually read that made a boatload of sense that can be applied to the medical world. You tell me if I'm accurate or not. I was reading a little statement from one of the wisest kings that ever walked on this earth. He was the son of King David. His name was Solomon. And here's what Solomon said. Solomon actually said, "The curse causeless shall not come." In other words, a curse never comes without a cause. Now, if I accept that fact from Proverbs 26, if I accept the fact that a curse never comes without a cause, then the question is, what do I do next when I identify a curse? And the answer came from another wise man. His name is Job. And Job said this. Job says, "The cause which I knew not, I searched it out." And I thought to myself, wow, that's like practical instruction from a book that a lot of people don't even think is relevant today. But boy, that point is absolutely powerful. A curse never comes without a cause, and if I don't know the cause, then go search it out and find it out. And I always ask people, how long have you had hypertension? Oh, I've had it for X amount of years. True story, I had a coworker, and he, when I was working in corporate many years ago, and my job was to work with high-level executives. So I had to always have an engineer that would go with me. I would do the negotiating with the executives. The engineers would do all the technical talk. So I had this guy, his name was Michael. And Michael was driving in my car, and we're driving down to head to our appointment, and Michael pulls out these pills. So I saw him pull out the pills. This is, boy, how long ago was that? This is like 2005 or 6. And I remember we're driving in the car, and I see him pull out those pills, and I was like, "Hey, man," I said, "what's that?" And he was like, "Oh, this is my medication." I was like, "Medication for what?" And he was like, "For my high blood pressure." And I was like, "You have high blood pressure?" And he was like, "Yep." I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He said, "Sure." I said, "How long do you want to have it?" And he just thought, like, what a weird question. What do you mean? He said, "What do you mean, how long do I want to have it?" He said, "My doctor told me I'm going to have this for the rest of my life." I said, "Bro, do you believe everything your doctor tells you?" And then he was like, "Well, what other options do I have?" I said, "If I could show you how you can no longer need those pills anymore, would you want to know?" And I just keep driving. And he was like, "Of course I want to know. Tell me." I said, "Get your pen and paper out." So I shared a whole bunch of stuff that I'm showing you tonight. I showed it to him. Michael did it, and his blood pressure went whoop. And I mean, it just got super regulated. He loved it so much that he was like, "Man, I'm going to tell my brother." His brother was like a senior pastor of a 4,000 member, big Baptist church in Georgia. And his brother called me and said, "Hey, I want you to show this to my people." So then my wife and I went over to their church and showed it to a whole bunch of people. And we had all these sick people getting well. I mean, it was just the most amazing event. And the reality is that the first thing that I taught Michael, I said, "Michael, let's look at the cause of why you have this. So let's go ahead and let's talk about this." Now, the reality is that you know the first cause that people say, right? The first cause that people often say is, well, it has to be heredity. My dad had it, my dad's dad had it, and my dad's dad's dad had it, and therefore I got it. And the question is that true? No, it's not true. Always remember this little lesson, okay? Heredity does load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. Don't forget that, okay? Heredity loads the gun. You can have the genetic disposition from mom and from dad. But the reality is if you do what mom and dad did, then more than likely you will get what mom and dad had. But if you don't do what mom and dad did, you greatly mitigate getting what mom and dad had. And so the reality is that heredity is not as strong as people make it sometimes. Yes, mom and dad may have had it, but that does not mean that you have to have it, okay? But the reality is you got to do something different than mom and dad did, all right? One of the biggest reasons why we see the continuum of disease throughout our family line is because we're all doing the same stuff. And so sometimes you got to break the cycle. If you break the cycle, lots of great things can happen, lots of great changes. And so it is that when we talk about the cause, I'm going to go ahead and identify a couple of hypertensive situations. There's something called primary hypertension. Primary hypertension, this is a type of blood pressure called primary. It tends to develop gradually over many years, okay? Primary. So if you have hypertension, you need to know what's the connection. Is it that I have nothing else, but I just have high blood pressure? If that's the case, then you have what's called primary hypertension. However, there's also secondary hypertension. Secondary hypertension, some people have high blood pressure caused by an underlying condition. This type of high blood pressure, called secondary hypertension, tends to appear suddenly and cause higher blood pressure than does primary hypertension. Various conditions and medications can lead to secondary hypertension. I think it's very sad that medication can lead to hypertension. You don't typically think of that. When you think of medication, it's supposed to be a solution, not a problem. But nevertheless, sometimes it happens. Now, what are some things that can lead to hypertension that we need to pay attention to? Number one, obstructive sleep apnea. If you have sleep apnea, the sleep apnea can actually cause the hypertension. So that does not mean that if you have hypertension, yes, you need to give attention to it, but don't give too much attention to addressing the hypertension and neglecting the sleep apnea. Because if you address the sleep apnea, you by default will also address the hypertension. So again, give attention to the hypertension to try to control it, but you also want to, more importantly, address the sleep apnea. Now, what else can do it? Kidney problems. What else? Adrenal gland tumors. What else? Thyroid problems. That's a big one. A lot of people, when they get their medical workup every year, I mean, I recommend it, and I've never seen a doctor have a problem with it, but I always tell people get a TSH. A TSH is a specific test in when you do an annual, your annual checkup. You go see your doctor and you want to get a good blood workup. You ask them, I'd like to have a TSH. And especially if you're symptomatic. And that checks your thyroid. That checks your thyroid glands and all the enzymes that come out of it, etc. It's called a TSH, okay? You can get that done because sometimes people are going through some of the problems with their blood pressure because they have a problem with their thyroid, all right? What else? Certain defects in blood vessels you're born with, congenital. What else? Certain medications such as birth control pills, cold remedies, decongestants, over-the-counter pain relievers. All of those can elevate your blood pressure. All of it. That's why you got to be mindful of the medications. Don't just take a medication because somebody said, oh yeah, I just took Motrin because it made me feel better. You need to look at, well, what's the side effects? What are some of the impacts? What are the residual side effects of this thing? Then, illegal drugs, of course, such as cocaine and amphetamines, and then alcohol abuse or chronic alcohol use, okay? So these are the things that can contribute to, secondary hypertension. So just watch out for that. Be careful with that. If you're here tonight and you have hypertension, you need to know which one you're dealing with. Am I primary or am I secondary? If you're primary, you focus everything on dealing with that hypertension. If it's secondary, try to give more focus on what the real problem is that's causing the hypertension, okay? Now, when it comes to addressing the cause, there are 4 key things. Now, where do I get these from, by the way? So, like I told you the other night, while I have certifications and certain degrees of training in health, I also like to quote the doctors. So this is a book that has been, in my library for many, many years. I've educated a lot of folks with it. I do a lot of health consultations with it. It's called Health Power. It's put together by, unfortunately, I have to say, as of this year, the late Dr. Hans Diehl. Hans Diehl died this year, okay? But Dr. Deal was a very powerful man in helping people with lifestyle medicine and helping individuals understand disease from the perspective of lifestyle. The other person who helped co-author this book was Eileen Luddington. And they put together this book, Health Power, to walk through these WDLDs and go into a lot of what are the causes of these things? What are ways to prevent it? What are ways to overcome it? So if you want to go online, there's sometimes you can get these things at really great discounts or what have you, but Health Power, really good book for the layman or the laywoman to have in their library. It's a very, very good book. I'd highly recommend it, okay? So what you'll see here is that here's what they found out. Key 4 reasons of why individuals are hypertensive. Number 1 is obesity, okay? We need to lose weight, all right? Obesity. Number 2, that's a guy, let's magnify him. What's he doing here? What's he doing? What does that picture indicate? Right, I just got off of work, loosened up the tie, and I just want to just veg, right? But this would indicate sedentary lifestyle. Just a lifestyle of more couch potato than anything else, okay? Sedentary lifestyle, that will definitely contribute. If you're sitting too much, that can actually contribute to hypertension, okay? What else is arterial plaque? Things that are building up in the arteries that's literally blocking the blood from flowing freely through, okay? Arterial plaque. And then lastly, of course, is salt, right? Sodium, of course, sodium. Now, here's a question for you. How many of you think that it's new news that sodium contributes to hypertension? Is that new to anybody here? We all knew that, right? Now watch this one. Watch this. How much salt is too much? Exactly. Woo! Well, I would agree. 15. If you're doing 1,500 milligrams, you're a salt factory, right? But you know what's funny? A lot of people know that sodium is the great contributor to hypertension. People know that. But when you ask, even a physician, if you ask them, how much is too much salt? Because lots of food groups have sodium. A tomato has sodium in it. You understand that? Peppers have sodium. Cucumbers have. A lot of food groups have sodium. So for someone to say avoid sodium is like saying avoid food, which does not make any sense. So the reality is that when you're telling somebody who's hypertensive, hey, you got to watch out for your sodium, it's important to talk about, well, how much is too much? It's not enough to just say, I avoid salt. It's not that you avoid salt. It's about how much is too much. So let's talk about that. How much salt is too much? Okay? Now, some books here that I brought with me, they've been so helpful in my journey. This is called the Encyclopedia of Foods and Their Healing Power. It's a 3-volume set. This is book 1. Book 1 goes through food. Book 2 goes through diseases. And then book 3 is a cookbook for specific body organs and body functions, okay? So they're put together. When I was in Switzerland, I was on the France side, and as I was driving through France, they said, oh, Dr. Pamplona lives right over there. So this is the man who helped put these together, Dr. George Pamplona, and they're very, very good books to have as a reference point in your library. So what I did was I went to here, and like I told you, I went to here because they did the research. These are the physicians that did all the science research on it. And here's what they found. They said that's how much salt is what we should have in a given day. Well, how much is that? In Health Power on page 126, what they said is an average of about 1 gram or 1,000 milligrams, which is 1/5 of a teaspoon of salt. That's added. Keep in mind, added. Why? Because all of our food already has a degree of sodium in it. So added salt. But when you go to the Encyclopedia of Foods, volume 1, page 346, here's what they said. Approximately half a teaspoon of salt a day, 1.25 grams, covers the need for sodium of an adult at approximately 200 pounds with a sedentary lifestyle. So what's happening is that we actually don't need a lot of salt. This is where I discovered I am truly a victim to the fast food world. Because the more that I began to eat food from restaurants and all this other stuff, I realized that they always overload their foods with salt. And what ends up happening is your tongue gets used to it. Your brain gets used to it. And so if you eat food with less sodium or what have you, we're like, this is disgusting. Where's the flavor at? And the reality is that we kind of trained our minds to a degree to like a lot of salt, a lot of fat, a lot of sugar. We've trained our minds for that. So to a degree, there needs to be a retraining of the mind. Now, this does not mean that you're going to live some dreary, drab life where you're going to hate every meal that you eat. That is not what I'm here to tell you. We're going to eat food on Sunday when we do our cooking class, and you're going to love it. It's going to taste amazing, but it's not going to be overwhelmingly loaded with all this salt. But here's the reality. What do you do if you start minimizing your salt intake to these recommendations? Well, here's the balance. Herbal seasonings. You bring that into the picture, and that helps balance it out so your food is filled with flavor. Okay? So no, we're not suggesting that you eat a bunch of drab, nasty, bland food. God forbid. But we do have to do maybe a bit more intelligent food preparation. To say, look, this much salt, a little bit more herbal seasonings, and it still comes out great. All right? But this is the reality when we're dealing with salt. So let's go ahead and let's look into some other counsels as we get ready to wrap this up here. Well, when the question comes up, what should we do? What should we do when we find out we have hypertension? I have actually asked many individuals with hypertension this question. You know what I asked them? How long have you had it? They'll tell me how long they had it. And then I'll say, how often do you pray about it? And a lot of times they'll say, never. And I'm just like, okay, can I show you what the science is showing? Not religion, science. Here's what they found. Scientific evidence that they showed that prayer works. Now, for the secular mind, if you're in a secular mind, you're anti-God, anti-religion, then you'll probably go in the path of meditation, right? You're going to go in some realm of meditation where you're trying to just kind of blank out all thoughts from the mind and these type of things. I do have a statistic on that. When we talk about diet in the mind on Friday, a lot of times for a lot of people, it doesn't really work very well for them. For some people, it does. But as an alternative, what I would present to somebody is I would say, try prayer, try God. Well, why? Because even science is acknowledging it. According to the Association for Psychological Science, Dr. Rosemarin says that the research that has been done on prayer shows it may have similar benefits to meditation. Here's what they found. It can calm your nervous system, shutting down your fight or flight response. It can make you less reactive to negative emotions and less angry. The reason why is because when prayer is taught right, prayer is not just simply going to God and asking for stuff. Prayer is knowing what God says about many things and then going to Him and asking Him for help to be in line with those things that you've already read about. So prayer has kind of like a reference point. And when individuals typically pray in harmony with promises from the Bible and things of that nature, they have found that they're able to rest their case on something beyond themselves that has a lot of power, and it causes a parasympathetic nervous system response, where now all of a sudden, they're just not worried as much anymore. They're not just concerned as much anymore. And lo and behold, people start feeling better. So it has a great vasodilation effect. And that's why a lot of people are praying about their issues. So again, for whoever that benefits, like I said, if for any reason you're like, I'm not the prayer kind of person. If you want to try meditation, you can do meditation. You can do what you believe helps you. But the reality is that even the science, which I am appreciative of, is showing, hey, we think there's something to this thing called prayer. Now, that's just one of the things you can do. I guess it's no wonder that if people start praying more, maybe there is some truth to this idea of a merry heart does good like medicine. It's like, there you go. Did you see the shape of the hearts inside the pill there? I thought that was pretty cool. But the reality is that, hey, the more cheerful we can be, it helps. So attitude is very big when it comes to blood pressure. Try to be more cheerful. Try not to allow your mind to dwell too much on negative. I get it. There's 1,000 things that we can point out is wrong about life. Family, you got to let it go. It'll kill you. Seriously, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. It will kill you if you're not careful. There's a lot of bad stuff in our world. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in the churches. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in our homes. It's very rare you can find an ideal place, okay? And that's truth. But the reality is that there's still some positives that we can look at. There's still some areas of hope that we can hold on to. And I would like to recommend, and I'm very serious about this, if you have trained your mind to be negative, you must fight that. It's very easy for some of us to always find the negative in something and to complain about stuff. If you're that person, again, either make the decision, or I would recommend pray and ask God to help you, to say, Lord, help me to be more positive about life, about people, and etc., because all this stuff is doing is making me sick. And that's not what even God wants for you, let alone I'm sure those who love you want for you. Well, foods. Oh boy. Here we go. Now, book 2. Book 2 has hypertension in it. It has an arrow. Let me do it like this. There we go. It has an arrow that points down. These are the foods that you do not want to eat at all, or certainly not eat a lot of if you're hypertensive. Then it has an arrow pointing up. These are the foods you want to eat a good bit of if you are hypertensive. But some of the things that they put here, I have to admit, was shocking. And so I don't know if this will shock you or what have you, but it's the science. Some of the food groups that are contributing to hypertension. Number 1, coffee. Coffee. Coffee is not good for the cardiovascular system. There's almost a big period, exclamation point at the end of that. It's really not good. I mean, all of the science is showing caffeine and everything. It's not good for the cardiovascular system, okay? Coffee. What else did they find? Black pepper. Black pepper. They found that black pepper, these piquant sauces or spices, not good if you're hypertensive. Here's a big one. Remember, I'm your brother, I'm your friend. Okay? And I love you. Another one, cheese. Oh, how dangerous it is, especially if you're hypertensive. Cheese is rough on digestion. That's a whole different subject. But cheese especially is a very high, so especially hard cheeses, your cheddar cheeses and things that very high in sodium. Very, very high in sodium, okay? Not only that, but yes, meat. Meat, it's right there on the list. Meat, poultry, fish, chicken. And I know that people are going to say fish. I got something for you for the fish. But the fish has omega-3s. That's good for you. Yes, it does. But it has some bonuses. We'll talk about it. Another one that we need to be guarded with is soft drinks. Soft drinks. You got to be very careful with that. Some of them are very high in sodium. And remember, anytime you take a liquid in your body, it goes through the bloodstream faster. So if you're taking a soft drink that's high in sodium amongst, like corn syrup we talked about last night, when you're taking those things in, that stuff is going through your bloodstream way quicker because it's a liquid, right? It doesn't need as much breaking down like food. But yeah, so you want to be careful with your soft drinks. And yes, here's another one. Again, just the messenger family. Eggs, especially with the yolk. Especially with the yolk. If you're battling with hypertension, you want to minimize, or if you have the wherewithal, eliminate these from your diet. Big contributors to hypertension. Now, what are some foods that we can eat that can help reverse hypertension? Number 1, a diet high in vegetables, especially your green vegetables. Your green foods are loaded with minerals, okay? So we're talking about no iceberg lettuce. We're talking about green leaf, red leaf lettuce, right? We're dealing with some lovely cabbage and things of that nature. All the green you can get, your kale, your spinach, and the list goes on. And you want to get it in, and both cooked and raw, okay? Salads, of course, you're raw cooked. Obviously, you can cook it, saute it. In addition to that, are beans, beans, beans. If you're fighting with hypertension, you want to get more beans in your diet. Beans are loaded with antihypertensive elements in them. So the bean world is huge, you know. And I understand, you know, the more beans you have, the more people will know you had beans. I understand that. But there are ways that you can avoid that. So come to the cooking class on Sunday. On Sunday, we'll talk about how to make it less known that you eat beans. All right? So don't worry about that. We got something for you. But beans are wonderful for helping to fight against hypertension. Wonderful elements in them. And, you know, again, these books kind of break them down. If you want to kind of take a look at it afterwards, you're welcome to do so. And I would recommend go on Amazon, go on these places. There's people selling these books very, very inexpensive. All right? And then, of course, whole grains. Whole grains are huge. They really, really work well. You know, you want to make sure that it's a whole grain and not a stripped grain. And the way that you'll know the difference is this picture. When you look at a whole grain, it's always going to have those three. You're going to have endosperm, you're going to have bran, and you're going to have germ. If you're eating white rice, that is basically endosperm, no bran. That's a problem. Because look at this word in bran that you're not going to see in endosperm. In endosperm, notice, you got source of complex carbohydrates, B-complex vitamins, and proteins, right? Germ, essential fatty acids, and then you got vitamin E, B-complex vitamins, and trace minerals. Now, notice a word that you're going to see in bran that you did not see in endosperm or in germ. Right there. Fiber. That is king when you eat food. If you want things to go through the bloodstream, or go through the digestive system well and get broken down well, you need to have a lot of fiber in your diet. And this is something that the world of white rice and white bread and white this and white that, it doesn't necessarily give that to us. And this is the reason why, and you're going to hear me talk about this, especially tomorrow night, to all of my friends dealing with diabetes. It's imperative that we get more whole grain foods, okay? The whole thing put together, all right? Whole grains. Foods that fight inflammation, there's a lot, you know, tomatoes, fruits, nuts, and all these things. Look at the inflammation foods. Fried foods, bad. Cause a lot of inflammation in the bloodstream, okay? Inflammation will be the precursor to heart disease, metabolic disease, cancers, and neurodegenerative diseases. Inflammation in the blood. We talked about every time you get checked every year, you do blood work, something I'm going to recommend you do it. I do it every year. Every time I get blood work done, I always ask for this. It's called a CRP, C-reactive protein test. That is an indicator of how much inflammation is in the bloodstream. And if your CRP is low, then there's a good chance you don't have a lot of inflammatory markers, which is also indicative of maybe you're doing a lot better off after all. But if your CRP is high, then that becomes a concern, and you might need to start taking a look into some other things. But inflammation foods are huge. So again, what are they? Fried foods, sodas, refined carbs. Again, that's going into the white rice, the white bread, the white pastas, and all of that. Then you have lard, processed meats. All of that can just increase that inflammation in our bloodstream. But here, leafy greens, olive oil, tomatoes, fruits, nuts, these are foods that fight inflammation. They make sure that you don't have an inflammatory response in the body. Now, fatty fish is there. So there is some good that comes from fatty fish. You know, there's definitely some good that comes from it. And probably the number one thing is, you know, your omega-3s, you know, all three. You know, how many of you, where can you get omega-3s in the plant world? Flaxseed, right? That's always the first one I expect to hear. Chia, yeah, walnuts, and more. Let me give you a little, hemp seed, yes, this is correct. But let me give you a little something that might be eye-opening to you. Have you ever wondered why do they call it omega-3? Probably not, right? The reason they call it omega-3 is because there's 3 omegas. One is called ALA, EPA, DHA, omega-3. Flaxseed, chia seed, hemp seed, walnuts is only ALA. It's not your EPA and DHA. And that's the reason why, if you have a plant-based diet, you want to definitely supplement and get yourself a good EPA, DHA supplement so you can get all 3. However, when you eat salmon and a lot of the fatty fishes out there, you're getting EPA, DHA, and ALA. But could it be that we might get some bonuses? Well, here's one, gentlemen. A study by scientists at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle linked eating a lot of oily fish or taking potent fish oil supplements to a 43% increased risk for prostate cancer overall and a 71% increased risk for aggressive prostate cancer. The report was published online in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute. So sometimes you're getting good, but you might be getting some bad. So you want to be very careful with that. What are some things that we can eat when we're dealing with hypertension? What are some things that we can take, especially with hypertension? Fresh garlic. You can't go wrong here. If you start including more garlic, garlic is very anti-hypertensive. Garlic is a very anti-hypertensive food. It's also a bit blood thinning. Now, it's nothing like Coumadin or warfarin, some of those pharmaceuticals out there, but it does have a blood thinning component to it. Here's what the science has shown. During the 3-month study in the placebo group, systolic blood pressure increased with 6.3 milligrams hemoglobin, and diastolic BP increased with 4.6, changes which were significant. So notice, after the 3 months, the effect of garlic on systolic blood pressure after adjusting for baseline value was significant, and this effect was more significant in hypertensive patients. So the more that people started to include garlic, you crush it, you pour it over your salads and different things, and you can enjoy it. Or if you like the garlic cloves, steam it. But steam it very little. Don't let it sit too long. But it takes away some of that pungent impact. If any of you eat raw garlic, you know what I'm talking about. It has that strong impact on you. But if you steam it just for a few moments, then you can just take it right out the clove and just eat it. First of all, it tastes delicious. And then secondly, it's very, very medicinal for you. Here's another big one. Not only can you add garlic, flaxseed. Wow. Flaxseed is amazing for fighting hypertension. Look at this report. Supplementing your diet with flaxseed may lead to a significant decrease in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, according to a report published in Clinical Nutrition 2016. For this report, researchers reviewed 15 previous published clinical trials with a total of 1,302 participants. Watch this, which tested the effects of flaxseed supplementation on blood pressure. Their analysis determined that consuming flaxseed for more than 12 weeks had a greater effect on blood pressure than consumption of flaxseed products for fewer than 12 weeks. Some experts suggest limiting consumption to less than 50 grams or 5 tablespoons per day. So if you did 2 tablespoons of flaxseed with applesauce, yogurt, smoothie, whatever, 2 tablespoons in the morning, then 2 tablespoons in the afternoon over a salad or otherwise. This is wonderful in fighting against hypertension. Flaxseed. Say again? Oh, has to be ground. Thank you so much for that. It has to be ground. You get them whole like the picture shows here. That's what it's going to look like. And then you get yourself a little coffee grinder. You can get it from a thrift store for $5. And you just grind it down to powder, and then you refrigerate it. You need to keep it refrigerated because flaxseed can go rancid pretty quick, especially the oil version. Keep it in the refrigerator and just do basically about 4 tablespoons a day. But, hey folks, don't do this as far as 4 or 5 tablespoons if you are not hypertensive. If you do this and you are not hypertensive, you can end up becoming hypotensive. You can start having low blood pressure. So you want to be careful. Don't take that much flaxseed. You only do 4 to 5 tablespoons of flaxseed in a day when you're hypertensive. But once you're not, then you can minimize it to basically two a day, and that's it. Tablespoon in the morning, tablespoon in the afternoon. Okay? That will be good enough. Here's another big one, beetroot. Beetroot. So, vasoconstriction. When you get something called nitric oxide is what makes your blood vessels dilate. There are two things that you can do that can make your blood the nitric oxide increase in your blood vessels. One of them is take beetroot. You can buy it in powder form. That's the easiest way, because juicing is a lot of work. If you want to juice, bless your heart, go ahead and do it. But you can go to Sprouts, you can go to Whole Foods, and you can go to Amazon, and you can buy 100% beetroot, no added ingredients. And it's powder. You pour that thing in, and it works very quickly. You just mix it in water, shake it up, drink it down. It actually tastes pretty good. Tastes like beets. So here's what they found. Beet juice has been shown to release nitric oxide, increasing blood flow and oxygen exchange and improving exercise efficiency. Beetroot supplement resulted in significant increases in exercise duration. This is very good, actually. There's a whole study I have on heart failure. Heart failure for many people is completely reversible. I don't know if you know that. It's completely reversible. For many, not all. But heart failure can be reversed. Beetroot needs to be your best friend if you battle with heart failure. It'll help you, especially when it comes to exercise. But again, beetroot supplement resulted in significant increases in exercise duration, peak power, peak oxygen uptake while exercising. In other words, taking beetroot juice prior to exercise helped heart failure patients exercise longer and stronger and take in more of that vital oxygen. Beetroot has been shown in study after study to lower blood pressure, a major issue for heart failure patients, so the benefits just keep coming. So again, get some beetroot out there, and you can start adding that to your dietary regimen. In 2020, a lot of my presentations are online, and somebody watched our presentation on hypertension. Here's what they sent me a few years ago. Thank you for your health message. My wife and I viewed one of your programs on high blood pressure and tried some of the suggestions you presented on using flaxseed and beetroot juice. He said, I went from an average of 160 over 97 to 124 over 82 in just a few weeks. He says, I am no longer taking blood pressure meds with all the adverse side effects. Thank you. And boy, I said, thank you, Lord. So, I mean, this works, okay? That's the only reason I put it up there. Not to impress you, but to impress upon you, it works. And for many, it works in just a few weeks. This is not something you got to do forever. So this is just beautiful to me, that these are the realities of what people are dealing with. I'm going to do a couple more, and then we're going to wrap it up. So what else can we do, right? What are some other things we can do? Exercise. That's another way you get more nitric oxide, is you got to move, family. You got to move, you got to exercise. Getting some good sunlight exposure helps, and I cannot stress enough, drink your water. Drink your water. You got to hydrate. You got to hydrate. Let's go through it very quickly. When we talk about exercise, okay, aerobic. This is especially where you'll find great success with battling hypertension. You got to be careful if you're going to do strength training. Please be careful with that. Strength training, my concern with a lot of people with strength training is they don't breathe. You start lifting weights, and if you're not guided, you just start trying to just and what do we do? What's one of the number one reactions when you're lifting something heavy? You hold your breath. That is the worst thing you could do if you're hypertensive, because it's called Valsalva. It's like when you hold your breath and you just go, you are shooting your blood pressure up, like very quickly. Now, if you're already stage 2 hypertensive, and then you do and all that stuff, you could shoot it up and you could have a crisis right on that bench. So that's the only reason why I encourage people to be very guided if you're going to do strength training. Cardio, aerobic, is a little bit easier. So examples of that, walking, jogging, playing sports, etc., swimming, all of that is very, very good for when you're battling with hypertension. Here's what they found. Regular exercise makes the heart stronger. A stronger heart can pump more blood with less effort, and as a result of the force on the arteries decreases, this lowers blood pressure. So I understand that some of us might be, maybe, a little bit less inclined. We just don't want to exercise. You just don't feel like it. And I always tell people, when you don't feel like exercising, you know what you need to do? Exercise. Just get it done. And because the reason why is because once you do it, you'll start feeling better. It'll start kicking in. Everything in you is going to be like, I don't feel like doing this. I don't want to do it. You got to cut that voice off. You just got to be like, look, get up and move. And then you just start moving. And again, walking is probably king. Just brisk walk. You know, brisk walk. Brisk walking, that's brisk walking. You know what I'm saying? This is brisk walking. You can do that. You can do that. You know? So just start getting in that brisk walk. You will find. And you don't need to do a lot. Even the American Heart Association says 30 minutes. That's 15 minutes one way and 15 minutes back. Put on your favorite listening information, you know, podcast, sermon, music, whatever you like. Put it on and say 15 minutes one way, 15 minutes back. You're done. Okay? But get that in, you'll be amazed. Simple exercise regimen, warm up, stretch, 10 to 15 minutes. Workout, which is your cardio, a little bit of strength, 25 to 45. And then cool down, 5 to 10. And always remember, be intentional to execute perfect posture and good balance routines. Okay? That's a simple little setup for exercise. But if you're hypertensive, you need to do it. It's how you get rid of this thing. Okay? Lastly, we'll go ahead and stop here for tonight. Water. Yeah, you got to get it in. You got to get it in. Water, 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 right? When we talk about pure water, how much do we need? Take your body weight. Whatever that number is, slice it in half. And that's how much fluid ounces of water you want to get in a day. Okay? You have a whole day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you got 100 ounces of water you want to get in for the day. Spread it out. First thing in the morning, take in 16 ounces with a little bit of lemon in it. Maybe a scoop of your beetroot. You go ahead and take that in. And then after that, give it about an hour or so. Then maybe you'll take in another 8 ounces. You could spread it out. Get the bottles that hold the amount of water you need to drink in a day, so you could just keep taking from it, and you know you have one simple goal. I need this thing to be empty by the end of the day. Do the best you can. In time, it'll get easier. All right? But you will knock that thing out, and you will do well. I have one of these, and I will tell you that it is it is a worthy investment. Yeah. Or more. It all depends. It all depends. They have some that are as little as $1,200, and then they have some that could be as high as $8,000 if you want. Many years ago, I bought it, and you know, it's like I cannot recommend it enough. Infrared saunas are known to do so much good for the body. It depends. You can ask them because they have different saunas. Do you have to put water on any rocks or anything to create steam?
In the sauna, no, and they tell you not.
Okay, so you just pretty much are pressing the temperatures and sitting in?
Just go in and it's hot.
Okay, so more than likely, that's probably an infrared. More than likely, that's an infrared. If you can do that, here's what you want to get in, okay? 2 recent experimental studies by, they name the names, in 100 men and women, ages 32 to 75 with at least one cardiovascular risk factor reported reductions in both systolic blood pressure and diastolic after 30 minutes. So you usually want to get in about 30 minutes is your top number. 20 minutes is going to be your bottom number. 20 minutes is what they call the release of something called heat shock proteins. And you got to be in there at about 20 minutes, and you want the temperature, as long as you can handle it, to be at about 140. Oh, yeah, you're fine. You're fine. If you get in at 140, because remember, infrared heat is different from steam. Steam heat affects you completely differently. Yeah, infrared goes down to the cellular level. That's why infrared sauna has way more science behind it as far as helping to fight cancer, metabolic disease, heart disease, and the list goes on. The saunas with the steam are pretty much working topical. It's making you get a good sweat and things of that nature, but it's not getting down to that cellular level. So that's the reason why infrared, way more medicinal, okay? If I get home early enough tonight, I'm going to go in the infrared sauna for 30 minutes, and then you go right to bed. You go right to bed, sleep like a baby, and you wake up feeling absolutely refreshed. But, go ahead. Yeah, no, but that's good, though. That's really good. Sure, and then you get some rest. That's the thing. You got to, when you do these are treatments. So once you finish your treatment, give your body time to rest and take it all in and let it do its healing work. That's what you want to do. Go ahead. Correct. Yep, dry sauna. So you want to do infrared. Family, I cannot stress enough that hypertension is something we can fight. It's very evident. All the data is out there. But the biggest thing I want you to remember is to guard against yourself, because a lot of us are just absolutely stressed out. And I want to remind you that whenever you get to a place in life, if you feel you can handle it on your own, great. You do whatever you're doing. But if you ever get to that place that you're overwhelmed and you feel like, I've heard these words come out of many mouths before, and it came out of mine one time, is I can't take it anymore. It's too much. I'm getting overwhelmed. If you ever get to that place, I just want to let you know there is someone that is there who cares. And God is ready for you to talk to him, because he's been longing to talk to you for a long time. And so I want you to remember, you can pray. You can go to God and you can read his promises and say, Lord, I need your help right now. I'm overwhelmed. And he loves showing up and helping us. And so I hope, did we learn some things for hypertension and how we can fight this thing? Yeah? All right. So let's all do what we can to make sure that we're going to have healthier, happier lives. We're going to put to silence this silent killer. And let's do all that we can to take what we've learned and especially share it with others. If you don't mind, we're about to get on these roads, and we just don't know how life turns out sometimes. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask for a little prayer that God will just bless and keep you as you go, so that we can go ahead and get home to our home and our families. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, I just want to thank you so much that we talked about hypertension tonight. We learned some great things. Lord, I pray help us to remember the blessing is in the doing. So help us to put into practice what we've learned, especially for those of us who are battling with some elevated pressure. Maybe we're in that stage 1, 2, or higher. We're just grateful to know that all of it can be reversed if we just simply learn to cooperate with you and to put these things into practice. So be with us now as we go, and grant us safe journeys. May we come home safely and find our homes in safety, and keep us till we meet tomorrow. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.